Members of the public, I would like to say that as a committee, we do understand that the matters under consideration tonight can be emotive. However, please be respectful of those around you in the public gallery and the committee and refrain from any booing, cheering or any other form of disturbance. So now we shall move to the main part of business. First item, minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 15th October, which I believe are at the back of the room. Is that okay to sign them, please? Thank you. 2. Emma, have there been any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Hess. Sorry. There's the chairman has an interest in land at rear of 9 Bramble Avenue. He knows one of the objectives that lives directly opposite the proposed development, who has submitted an objection, but he does not regard that this will affect any decision he takes after hearing the information this evening. He has an interest in a non-pecuniary interest in item A3, the church. When this application was first heard, he was a member of the Farnham Society's Planning Committee, which had objected to the original application, and as a consequence did not participate in the discussion or decision to defer this application. He resigned from the Farnham Society's Planning Committee shortly afterwards and has not participated in any further discussions with any members of the Farnham Society regarding this particular application. Although revised plans have been submitted, he is not aware that the Farnham Society's Planning Committee are continuing to object to this application, but he has played no part in the development of their revised objection. Although he continues to remain a paid-up member of the Farnham Society, he does not regard that this will affect any decision that he may make after hearing this application. And thirdly, also the chairman has a non-pecuniary interest in item B2, Meadowview. This application is for a property located in Farnham Castle Ward that he represents on both Waverley Borough Council and Farnham Town Council, and was approached by the person who lives next door to the property for which the application has been submitted. He's only met this person on the site visit that took place on Friday the 6th of December with planning officers present. She's also requested technical advice regarding how to make representations, which Councillor Beeman provided at the times, and has stressed the need to be impartial. The person has submitted an objection to this application, but he does not regard that this guidance he's provided will affect any decision that will be made with this application. That's all before the meeting. Thank you.
The disclosure. Members of the public. Any questions from members of the public, Emma?
None received, Chairman.
Questions from members? Are there any questions from members, Emma?
None received, thank you.
Right, any relevant legislation to the government guidance or legislation since the last meeting?
No update, Chairman.
Right. Right, before we start the evening meeting, I'd like to go round the table of the officers, if they could please introduce themselves, please.
Good evening, members. I'm Lewis Jones, Planning Solicitor.
Evening, I'm Ruth Dovey, Principal Planner in Southern and Western Team.
Good evening, members. I'm Chris French, Area Team Leader.
Good evening, members. Carl Houston, Planning Officer.
Good evening, members. Olivia Gorham, Planning Officer.
Good evening, members. Philippa Stadden, Senior Planning Officer.
Chris Berry, Interim Head of Planning and Economic Development.
Good evening, John Rabini, and I'm the Vice Chairman, Councillor for Waverley Borough Council and Hayes Midtown Councillor.
Hello, Emma Dearsley. I'm the Committee Secretary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the main items on the agenda, please. The first one, the site inspections arising from the meeting. There was three site inspections on the 6th of December, but should there be any other site inspections, these will take place on Friday the 17th of January, at a time to be agreed. Right, let's move on to the main items. The application subject to public speaking. The first one is A1, WA 20190333, the land at the rear of 9 Brambleton Avenue, Farnham. the erection of a dwelling with vehicle access from Hillary Road, together with associated works, as amended by plans received on the 18th of September 2019 and amplified by plan received on the 1st of October 2019. Carl, could you please present, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members.
Apologies, councillors, we're just having a problem with the presentation, so...
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a 3-bed dwelling with associated works. Since the writing of the report, there is one update on the update sheet for a landscaping condition and a condition for the details of walls, gates and fencing. The application site in red is located within the developed area of Farnham. The application proposes to subdivide the existing plot of 9 Brambleton Avenue with an access from Hillary Road. Hillary Road and Brambleton Avenue is mixed in character with a variety of architectural styles. The land slopes downwards from southeast to northwest. As such, the application site is at a higher ground level than the dwellings on the opposite side of the road. So on the proposed block plan, it shows the proposed dwelling here. It is set back from the road within a spacious rectangle plot. The land levels are proposed to be lowered so that the proposed ridgeline is only 33 centimetres higher than the adjacent bungalow. Photograph A is looking at the application site southwest along Hillary Road. Photograph B is looking towards the application site northeast along Hillary Road. You can see the access to 13 Hillary Road just there. Photograph C is a view from where the proposed dwelling will be towards Hillary Road, and then you can see 12 Hillary Road in white there. Photograph D is the view of the application site from Hillary Road. The dwelling is roughly in line with the garage, the adjacent garage. Proposed front and rear elevations. So the design is a shallow bungalow style which utilises roof space to reduce the overall bulk and mass of the dwelling. There are a number of examples of shallow bungalows within the street scene. As you can see from the side elevations, there are no proposed windows on the first floor level. So the proposed ground and first floor plans with the ground floor on the left. It's an existing and proposed context plan. The proposed dwelling is here on the proposed plan. This shows the proposal within the context of the wider area of Brambleton Avenue and Hillary Road and the proposed response to the pattern of development within the area. This is the site sections plan which shows the lowered ground levels and the dwelling being just slightly higher than the adjacent bungalow. So the matters of planning judgment relate to the impact on visual amenity. The officer's report sets out that the shallow bungalow design would be in keeping with the street scene and the proposed plot would respond well to the density of development and size of plots. The impact of residential amenity. The officer's report sets out the proposal has been assessed with regards to separation distances, position of windows, levels and acceptability with the residential SPD, where there would be no loss, it concludes there would be no loss to residential amenities of neighbours, highways, access and parking. There is sufficient parking on site to meet the needs of the 3-bed dwelling and the proposed single access is not considered to be harmful. For the reasons set out in the officer's report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Carl. We have 2 public speakers and also a speaker from one of the ward councillors, please, of every respects this ward. Could I ask Mr. Simon Patterson to come forward, please? You have 4 minutes. And you start speaking.
Thank you. There are a number of objections, which I'll read through and summarise. We object on the grounds that it's not compliant with the Farnham design statement, nor is it compliant with the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan Policy, FNP1. Due to the height of the site, the proposed property would be looking into 3 front bedrooms of 12 Hillary Road, 1 front bedroom and 1 living room of 14 Hillary Road, plus 3 bedrooms of 13 Bramerton Avenue. It has an unneighbourly impact to the amenity of the occupants opposite and a negative impact on the residents of Hillary Road, increasing the traffic in an already busy cul-de-sac. It is out of character in size and scale to the street scene. The exit of the driveway would open opposite the driveways of 12 Hillary Road and 13 Bramerton Avenue. Residents on the north side of Hillary Road park in the road due to narrow, steep driveways, which are not easily accessible, especially in winter. Highways have stated that any cars exiting the proposed driveway will have to exit forward. We would like to know how this is going to be policed. Hillary Road is not of standard width. It is only 2/3 of a standard road, and this can cause difficulty in cars and lorries passing safely. In extremely wet weather, flooding occurs through poor road drainage and the south-north camber of the road. The water runs down driveways, so by adding another driveway onto Hillary Road, even with its own drainage, would impact on an already difficult problem, especially during storm conditions. As the lowest point for water drainage is between the driveways of 12 Hillary Road and 13 Bramerton Avenue. The height of this property would block out a proportion of the low winter sun that aids defrosting in this section of the road. Past history shows that one car from number 13 has rolled down its driveway and demolished part of 14's garden wall, and on another occasion a car slid into the wall of number 20 Hillary Road due to poor weather conditions. In 1999, an inspector dismissed the appeal for a property to be placed in the garden of 14 Bramerton Avenue, exiting onto Hillary Road, through policy, impact, character, appearance, overdevelopment and unneighbourliness. Number 11 Bramerton Avenue is a building plot in its own right, and there is no objection to one property being built facing and exiting onto Bramerton Avenue, within keeping of the other properties in Bramerton Avenue. The tree preservation order can be incorporated into the house design or the trees replaced. Precedents could be set to allow more development in the future on this site if this application is passed. And we have a question as to whether there's an appropriate assessment of the SPA mitigation. Those are the objections summarised. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. Right. We now have another public speaker, Jessie Chapman, in support, please. Oh, no. Again, 4 minutes, I'm afraid.
Thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak in favour of the proposal this evening, and I am pleased that your officers have recommended the application for approval. I note the very good report provided to you by officers in making their recommendation. Officers have identified that the proposal is acceptable and fully compliant with the requirements of the councils, the town councils and government's planning policies. As such, I do not really have anything further to add except that I am aware of the third-party comments. As you will be aware, third parties were concerned that 2 dwellings would result in a form of development which would not be acceptable at this site. This was also the view of your officers, and, together with the help and input of officers, a single unit development has duly been designed and which is before you today. Accordingly, the officer's report clearly sets out that there are no planning matters which offend the policies contained within the development plan. There's no issue with regard to the design, appearance, scale, height, mass, neighbour amenity, its sustainable location. There's been no objection from Surrey County Council with regard to highways or flooding. There's no impact with regard to ecology or arboricultural matters. A suitable mitigation, a suitable Section 106 agreement is in place to provide mitigation towards the SPA. I also note a number of conditions that have been imposed which ensure the compliance of the proposed development with the Council's policies. Unfortunately, there is still an objection to the proposal. Although the application has not been aided by a negatively worded petition or other matters that have been going on, it is my submission that the application is acceptable, and regrettably, I feel that there are those who simply do not wish to see any development at all take place in this site. Again, I submit that development is acceptable, and it is also the view shared by your officers. We believe that the application has considerable merit, and it is respectfully requested that planning permission be granted. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. We have also one of the ward councillors, Councillor Hyman, who wishes to speak. Councillor Hyman, you too have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Yes, good evening. Now, yes, I'd like to thank Mr Patterson and other residents for the information that they've provided in their responses from the beginning back early in the year. I found that a great help in putting together the reasons for calling, especially for them having found a precedent in the past appeal decision for number 14 Brambleton Avenue opposite. And obviously that's not considered in the officer report before you, which I'd apologise to the residents for that. I don't understand why, but I think we have to put that down to a change of case officer halfway, or more lately, more than halfway through this process. I'm not going to repeat the arguments that you've heard from the residents. The parking is mayhem there, though. It is a narrow road. I've travelled it a number of times. I'm very concerned about the swept track diagrams which are amongst the planning application records. There appears to be insufficient room to manoeuvre normal-sized cars from what is shown, and they can't go in and out, as has been said, in forward gear. There's just not enough room to turn if there are other vehicles there. This isn't a site where I think we should have no development, and we should say no never. There are some of those around Farnham, but I've tried to look at this one from both sides. I've tried to play devil's advocate, as I often do, but I can't really find any overriding reason why it shouldn't be on the main road, and why I shouldn't go along with the precedent of the inspector. He said that that previous precedent, it was out of character with the pattern of development in the area, to quote him, and he said it would make any dwelling on the site, whether a house or a bungalow, appear cramped and overdeveloped in comparison with the adjacent spacious housing layout. And due to the land levels, any dwelling, especially a house, would be very prominent in the street scene when viewed along Hillary Road, and I think exactly those same words could be used again. One house facing Brambleton would be fine. If Natural England provided the missing information, which I think, at the moment, as some people might know, I'm trying to force them to do through the system, it's required to conduct a complete appropriate assessment of the in-combination impacts on the spa. It's a legal issue. It's simple. We've either got one or we haven't got an appropriate assessment of the mitigation. There was a national planning policy guidance issued recently which made it completely clear, and frankly, if the position of all the lawyers and all the people who have been saying everything's fine, we don't need to assess the mitigation for the past 10 years, if they were right, obviously there wouldn't have been a moratorium last year, there wouldn't have been an MPPG or a court case that found that we do need that. So I think we have to be tough. We have to simply say, yes, we've got to do the honest thing, and I very much hope that members will simply refuse this on the grounds that there is no appropriate assessment and the precedents there and the other issues that have been raised. This could be put through as a single development, a single house facing Brambleton Road, if Natural England provides the information and we complete an appropriate assessment and it can be consented through the Article 6.4 derogation. I don't think anybody would disagree if it went through the exceptions tests after an appropriate assessment is there. So, yeah, a little bit difficult, but I really do think we should stick with trying to keep the design as a design statement and as per the appeal decision. That's a very strong precedent, I feel. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Before we go, do the officers wish to make any comments on what's been said?
I would just say that the appeal statement, the appeal has been addressed in the officer's report on page 14 within the design section. It goes into details to why this current scheme differs from the refused appeal at 14 Brambleton Avenue. I think the main difference is the plot sizes. So previously it was the refused scheme was a small square-shaped plot, whereas the proposed one is a long rectangle one that we have before you today. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I started on this application by reading all the letters from neighbours, and they seem to have three things in common. One is the risk of flooding due to the nature of the site. Another is traffic and parking issues due to the narrowness of the road. I just wonder if Surrey Highways actually made a visit. And the third common element from these letters was the overlooking from this the high position of this site. I, along with one other councillor, went on the site visit on Friday, and it became apparent that there's no problem with the design of the house. The house seems fine. But there is an issue with overbearing. I don't think the house is being put forward on the right site. I think it should be facing Brambleton Avenue. And then a lot of the issues that the neighbours have objected to would simply disappear. So I wouldn't be supporting the application on this particular position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions, please. The first is, can all the construction be done on site? The second question is, can the cars turn on site so that they can emerge in forward gear? And the third question is, how many car parking spaces are there? I should have picked it up, but I really need clarification. Thank you.
Officers.
In terms of the parking, there's 3 spaces shown on the site plan, and the Highways Authority. They've made comments. I appreciate the comment that you made in terms of whether they've visited or not. But that's not. They've made comments on the application, and they've looked at in terms of highway safety, and they're satisfied that they're raising no objection on highway safety grounds. So. With regards to those two points, and they've suggested a number of conditions as well in terms of it being laid out in that format prior to occupation. Thank you, Chairman.
Are you satisfied, Councillor Edmonds?
Yes, I really need confirmation that the condition of forward gear emergence can be, could I put it, confirmed. I really need to know that there's sufficient turning circle on site so that the car can emerge in first gear. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there's condition 4 of the consent is that it should not be occupied until space has been laid out in accordance with approved plans, so that vehicles can turn and enter in a forward gear. So we've got condition 4.
Thank you.
Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine's quite a simple question. I'm sure we've got an answer. Condition number 5 talks about the fast charge connectors. And the reason you give is in order that the development should not prejudice highway safety nor cause inconvenience to other highway users. I just don't quite get the connection between the safety of the highway when you're recharging inside the property.
I think perhaps you're, are you confusing the reason for a condition with the other condition? The fast charging socket should not...
Yeah, and it says underneath the reason
Yes.
in order should not prejudice highway safety.
No, and I presume that's if there'd be a charging socket somewhere else. Yeah, yeah.
That would probably be better, wouldn't
Yes, yes. So actually, the reason...
would you mind,
yes,
Clive?
please.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we agree that the reason actually should be the same as 6 below, which is to do with sustainable construction. So yes, we would suggest that reason be altered to reflect the same as what's on 6.
Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Cole.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think I'm coming down reluctantly on the side of the officers on this one. You know, ideally we wouldn't build it on here. But looking at the site, when I first saw it, I didn't think it was suitable. But the more I look at the site and realise the amount of land there and the way it's positioned, I really don't think on planning grounds we've got much of an argument, to be honest. I think the plot takes the application as drawn. As I say, I can understand the worry about overlooking. We all know how steep Brambleton Avenue is, or we do if we've ever delivered there. And, you know, there is always a difficulty in that area with overlooking simply because of that topography. It is a very steep hill. I just feel that given the size, given the style and the consultation with the officers, that actually this is probably on balance acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak? No. I have one question which I'd like to ask the officers. The size of the one dwelling, is it the same or smaller than the 2 dwellings that were originally proposed?
Sadly, we don't have that information, Chairman.
Okay. Any other councillor wish to speak? No? Oh, well, yes. I haven't forgotten you, Joe, don't worry. Councillor Hyman, as the ward councillor, you have the right to have another up to 4 minutes, please. And not to repeat anything you've already said, please. You know.
Do I have to take all of that? Are you sure? Just concerned a little bit about, I thank Councillor Edmonds for questioning in respect of going in, out and forward gear, and I did have a good look, very good look at the swept path diagrams that were provided in the application, and I don't think condition 4 actually does the job, because the approved plans don't show that vehicles can enter and emerge the site in forward gear, and unless obviously there aren't cars in the parking spaces that you know in any of the 3 parking spaces that are on the site. That would allow someone to turn, of course, but if you've got 2 cars or perhaps even 1 car in there, it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to turn around. In fact, it seems to show in the swept path diagrams vehicles reversing into the site and then leaving by turning left as though they're going into the close, which is very odd. It's almost as though the people who drew it had no knowledge of what was going on. It's you know, and what they were actually drawing. which you can do in theory, but when you go along to the site and you look at it and you look at the levels and the slope that there'd be, and how narrow that road is in particular, there's a great deal of difficulty of getting in and out. And also, if you're getting out, driving forwards from the nearest bay to the road, that's parallel to the road, which is nearest to number 13, you would have to, the driver's view would be obscured by your wall and any vegetation there, such that it could be quite dangerous pulling out, because you wouldn't be able to see things coming from the people as well as cars coming from the Brambleton Road direction, perhaps more dangerous for pedestrians than for other car drivers, because cars can bounce off each other. I do disagree with Councillor Coburn's issue on no planning grounds, because there's the highest level environmental law in the land says there's no appropriate assessment of the mitigation. We know that for a fact, because if there was one, it would have been presented. And so there really is in law no choice but to refuse this pending an appropriate assessment. And I would respectfully ask members to consider that that's really what this is about. We are meant to be putting the law first. We're not a law unto ourselves any more than Natural England are, or all the lawyers that have got things wrong for the past 10 years. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we ought to move to the recommendation. The recommendation being that, subject to conditions 1 to 10, additional conditions 11 and 12 in the update sheet, which I presume has been circulated, yes, and informed 1 to 4, permission be granted. As usual, we're going to on the usual voting system. For those in favour of the recommendation, press yes, and against the recommendation, press no, or if you wish to abstain, press the middle button. Yes, please vote. We want lights. So we're getting lights first, aren't we, Emma?
Yeah, so the red one is against, the blue one is abstain, and the green one is for.
How come I'm getting lights on mine? It's not happening, there's no lights, Emma. Oh, there is now.
So that's 6 for, 1 abstention, and 6 against. So it's
Chairman's decision.
Okay. I love this job. On balance, because I voted against the application, I therefore cast the casting vote against. I need an alternative. Would I propose that it's grounds of a neighbour's amenity because of the overlooking of the steep hill, please? That's my... Anybody else wish to comment? No?
Neighbours generally, or a particular neighbour?
Neighbours generally, but in particular one. No. Neighbours generally, I'd say. Well, I think that's it. Neighbours, plural.
Effect on residential amenity,
Yes, yes.
Yes. No, we don't need to know neighbours, we just need to know residential amenity generally.
Okay, right.
That seems to be the case.
Okay. So it's a refusal, the proposal is a refusal on the grounds of residential amenity to all neighbours. Overlooking.
Yes.
That's it? You put that forward? Are you okay? Could the officer just sub...
Okay, we got a, I think this is along the lines of the proposal by reason of its siting would result in an unacceptable overlooking and loss of privacy. We need to, the proposal would therefore conflict with policy TD1 of the local plan 2018 and policies D1 and D4 of the local plan 2002 and the MPPF 2019.
Yes, agreed.
I will take a vote on that, please.
Those in favour?
Okay, so those in favour for refusal, 7 for, 2 abstentions and 4 against.
Go on to the next item. Okay.
Chairman. Sorry, Chairman, Councillor Hyman at the back here. Number one, my lights are flashing, so they probably didn't ought to be, as I am allowed to vote, which I'm not. But secondly, there is a standard SPA reason because there wouldn't be in a Section 106 agreement if that has to be added anyway, doesn't it?
Thank you, Chairman. And they have completed the agreement, so it wouldn't be added on at this stage. Thank you.
Emma Simon, he didn't vote, did he?
Yeah, just for your reassurance, we keep an eye out on the screen here that you see here of who votes and who doesn't vote. So yours has stayed grey, so we know that you don't vote.
Yeah. Do we kill the lights or all vote out?
So we move on.
Yes,
You might want to leave if they've,
yes, okay. If anybody who's here for the first item wishes to leave?
they might want to leave.
God, really?
So you've only got the one.
Speaker, yes. Gosh. Yeah, voting. Okay. Can we move on to the second item tonight, which is again a public speaking item, and that is A2, which is WA 2019-1295-1 Grovelands Lower Bourne, GU10 3RQ, erection extensions and alterations as amended by plans dated the 15th of October 2019, and the officer is Olivia, I think, presenting this. Yes?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Application WA 2019-1295 seeks permission for the erection of extensions and alterations to 1 Grovelands. The application site is located within the southeastern plot of Grovelands, which adjoins Lodge Hill Road. The site comprises a detached 2-storey dwelling with detached flat-roofed double garage and surrounding garden. This aerial photograph shows the location of the site. Here you can see Grovelands cul-de-sac together with Lodge Hill Road and the application site and its relationship to surrounding properties. The application proposes the erection of a 2-storey extension on the north elevation following demolition of the existing garage. The application also proposes the erection of a part 2-storey, part 1st floor extension along the east elevation with a cantilevered 1st floor in the southeast corner. The block plan shows that the build line on the northern boundary is separated from the neighbouring plot by a minimum 3 metre distance and is well separated from the surrounding neighbouring properties. This slide shows the photographs of the site, with photograph A showing the side of the application site facing west. Photograph B shows the front of the application site facing north. Photograph C shows the existing rear and side elevation of the dwelling facing south, with photograph D showing the rear elevation facing south. Photograph E shows the view of the neighbouring property to the west from the street scene along Grovelands. The proposed elevations are shown here. The installation of 2 steel flues is also proposed. The front, rear and side elevations are shown here. There are no new windows proposed at first floor level in the north elevation, and the new windows proposed in the east elevation would serve bathrooms and a children's playroom, with the window serving the playroom being set at a sill height of 1.7 metres above internal floor level. The proposed ground floor plans are shown here, showing the 2-storey extension on the north elevation and the extension to the east elevation. The first floor plans show the proposed extension on the north elevation and the extended east elevation. The proposed roof plan is shown here, which shows the layout of the proposed extensions and the position of the proposed roof lights. The main matters for consideration are the design and impact on visual amenity and the impact on residential amenity. In terms of design, it's considered that the size, style and design of the proposed extensions would be visually acceptable, having regard to the mix of designs in the surrounding area. In terms of residential amenity, sufficient space would be retained between the application dwelling and the neighbouring properties, and the proposal has been designed so that windows don't overlook neighbours. So for the reasons set out in the officer report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have one public speaker, Mr. Chapman again. And as usual, 4 minutes, Mr. Chapman. Up to.
Once more, thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak in favour of the proposal this evening. Once more, I am pleased that your officers have recommended the application for approval. I again note the detailed report provided by officers in making their recommendation, and following a very helpful visit and meeting on site by the case officer and the Borough cultural officer, amendments were duly made, and again, this is the application that you have before you. Officers have identified that the proposal is acceptable and compliant with the requirements of the development plan. I note the objections from third parties, although I note that Farnham Town Council considers that the proposal fully accords with its policies. I am somewhat concerned that there does appear to be multiple objections from the same households, and which have been double counted. Nevertheless, members have called the application before committee for consideration, and I note the members' remarks with regard to some elements of the proposal, specifically the east elevation and the steel flues. We have suggested to the case officer that if these become an issue, we will not install the flues or the tile hanging and be led by what would be acceptable. However, officers have recommended the application for approval, and there is no objection from the Town Council. All aspects we consider, such as design, neighbour amenity, highway matters, ecology, trees and so on, have been found to be in accordance with policy and guidance, and the development proposed has been found to be acceptable by officers. Conditions have also been imposed which ensure compliance with the development plan. It is therefore, once again, respectfully requested that the application be granted planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edmund.
Sorry, two questions. One, has the Residential Extension Guide 2010 been applied to this development? The Waverley Guide? Adopted in October 2010 by the full council.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've listed it in the documents. It's something that we would have been applying to the proposal.
So it has been applied? Sorry, I can't see it in the list of guides.
It's in under number 10, Councillor, where it says Development Plan Policies and Guidance. In accordance with national and NPPF, due weight has been given to the relevant policies in the above plans. Residential Extension Supplementary Planning Document 2010. On page 29. 4 up from the bottom of the page.
Okay, and the second question is, why have we got steel flues? They certainly don't appear to be consistent with any recommendation we've got.
The application is as before you, Councillor. Steel flues have been proposed, and it's your judgment as to whether they're appropriate or not.
Thank you. I couldn't support steel flues.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Oh, yes. Councillor.
What's dispiriting about this is how bland, uninteresting, actually verging on ugly the whole thing is. It's so sad to be on a planning thing like this and just see one awful looking, boring, plain, beige extension after another, when Farnham is so full of interesting, different houses, and we're in a modern time where you could change that, and here we have another flat. I mean, the house itself isn't amazing, but there's an opportunity to do something nice here, and I just think it's just another, you know, off-the-shelf ugly thing just to provide more space. I'm sorry, but I won't, you know, not vote for it, but I do wish that sometimes officers, you would ask them to do something a bit more exciting in terms of their design, because I wouldn't call this design. I could have drawn that on the side and bung some floors in there. David's having a fit. Okay, thanks.
I mean, Councillor Murray, we have to deal with the applications that are before us, as you know. And I'm assured by my friend here on the right, Mr. Berry, as interim planner, the officers do try to get people to be interested in more imaginative design, yeah? Okay. Any other councillor? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Councillor Mirrlees. You know, this is just outside one of our areas of the Arcadian importance. And it's not bound by that, and I accept that. I don't like this. It's not that I'm going to vote against it because I don't like it. That's not really the point. But I thought Mr. Chapman did say there could be some movement on steel flues. Did I mishear that? You are going to put them in. So I'm sorry, we're not really supposed to have a conversation. But could you clarify, Chairman, what Mr. Chapman said for me, please?
Yes. Could Mr. Chapman please clarify the situation briefly? Okay. Councillor Coburn.
If I could come back, Chairman, then. I mean, one of the issues we have with some of the modern build is the shape of the bourne. The bourne is a big sort of bowl, if you think about it. The sound bounces off all the wooded hills, and the light does the same thing. So if you have a steel flue, for half the day it looks like a beacon sort of shining out because of the light reflecting from it. You know, to me it's totally inappropriate in that situation. I don't like the house, but I don't like the original house particularly, so I suppose, you know, we can't expect them to turn you know, an ugly duckling into a total swan. But certainly, if we can get rid of the flues, then I think we can live with this with adequate landscaping. I think the site is large enough. It's just we're getting more and more, as Councillor Murley said, designs that are creeping in that really bear no relationship to what's there. They don't even attempt to replicate any of the shapes, any of the materials. And they do stand out like a sore thumb, and good design is meant to replicate or at least enhance the area in which it sits. So I do have great reservations about this one. I don't think on planning grounds, if we can get those wretched flues out of the way, I don't think it's you know, strong enough to turn it down. But I just wish, I suppose we shouldn't wish for what we all want. We can't have the Taj Mahal on every plot, can we? But, you know, it is disappointing at times to see the same old, same old. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree 100% with the last two speakers. Having visited the site on Friday, the one thing that's got going for it is there's no passing traffic. Most people won't see it.
Right. Any other councillor wish to speak? Yes, councillor.
Sorry, at the risk of causing an upset, I actually quite like the design, and I actually really like steel flues as well. So I just think, in the interest of balance, this week in particular, I personally like steel flues and would vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
I mean, I quite like the fact that they've numbered all the trees. This is looking at the only thing that bit is quite good. They've numbered all the trees and named all the trees, but then in 14 paragraph we just say the proposal wouldn't have an acceptable impact on trees. I wish, having gone to the extent of listed all the trees, we'd actually said these trees are definitely going to stay. Because this is having gone to that length and detail, it gets a bit wishy-washy at the end, and I'm always worried that particularly they've got a couple of oaks in there, so we would really want to retain those as much as possible. But otherwise, yes, I thought the cladding looked could be quite nice, really, and it's a nice big extension for somebody.
Any other councillor? Okay, councillor Murray, is this to ask?
Yeah, I'm the tree woman. I see on 13.4 it says, however, the proposed amendments made would be acceptable in respect of foreseeable impacts on the retained trees. They can be effectively protected from the proposed development, provided an appropriate scheme of tree protection is conditioned and complied, which I hope should be enforced. That's very important. Reading this before Councillor Dixon said that, I presumed they were going to protect the trees. So I hope that is something that will be taken seriously. Thank you.
I think if you look at condition 3, councillor, that is provided for, yeah? Any other councillor? Move on.
Before you make the vote.
What was it?
Chair, I appreciate I'm not allowed to take part in the debate, but as a matter of procedures, when the applicant spoke...
Councillor Hammond, you can't speak, I'm afraid.
I was just wanting to say, if I could, that the webcast couldn't hear what he said.
I'm sorry.
And if you'd clarify what the applicant had said when the webcast didn't hear it, for the benefit of people at home.
I'm sorry, councillor Hammond, I just can't let you speak. It's not the procedure. Sorry?
Your discretion, Chairman.
Basically, if the council is minded to approve,
Mm-hmm.
then we are suggesting
Delegation. Flues.
that the decision on the flue is deferred for the head of planning's decision.
Okay, right. Right, any other councillors? The recommendation is, what?
In the light, should I explain?
Yeah, you better do.
Councillor.
I'll get wrong.
Yes, if I may, Chairman, responding to the concerns about the flues, I think we have a situation here where if you are minded to approve, there is the opportunity for you to defer the decision on the flues to the head of planning, who will make that decision on behalf of your decision. That is to say that everything else can go ahead, everything else can be approved, and that we can, it's effectively a condition, really, and that you allow the head of planning to make the decision, so that we don't hold up the decision. In consultation, obviously, with the chair.
Councillor Coburn?
I have no problem with that as long as the exact situation of this site is taken into consideration when you do it. It is adjacent to the south, the old BE3, the South Farnham Arcadian area, and it will have an impact because of the light. So, when you're looking at this site, it's very important when you're looking at anywhere in the Bourne, or we've already seen it in the earlier application, to look at the whole topography, because there is a knock-on effect from a lot of these sites. So providing you take into consideration all the strictures in the neighbourhood plan, then I think that's a good idea.
And ward councillors? No. No. Right, okay, we need, as the interim, we want to say subject, hold on. The recommendation that subject to conditions 1 to 6 and recommendations 1 to 6, with a permission be granted, but with the additional point that we delegate to the head of policy of planning and economic development, Mr. Berry, to approve the subject to receipt of an amended plan to remove the flues or a replacement for flues. Yes? Do I? Well, can I propose it? I propose a seconder. Oh, okay, too much off me. Right. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is A3, which is WA 2018-12160, Farnham United Reformed Church, now Spire Church, South Street, Farnham. The erection of extension and alterations following part demolition of existing extension, together with alterations to parking layout and associated works, as amended by plans received on the 28th of May 2019 and the 17th of October 2019. Well, public reasons, but first of all, the officer report from Philippa Stadden.
Thank you, Chairman. The application seeks permission for the erection of extensions in the form of a single-storey extension to the north-western side elevation to provide an entrance, foyer and cafe, and a single-storey extension to the south-eastern elevation following the demolition of the roof and first floor of the existing rear halls. The proposal also includes the reconfiguration of the parking and internal alterations. So just to give a bit of planning history, as set out in the officer reports, the Farnham United Reformed Church has ecclesiastical exemption from formal listed building consent. Instead, the church applies to its Synod Property Committee, which takes advice from the Listed Buildings Advisory Committee under consultation with other parties. The ecclesiastical exemption does not exempt from the requirements of the Principal Town and Country Planning Act to obtain separate permission for works on ecclesiastical land which constitute development as defined in that Act. The application was previously considered at Western Area Committee in July, where members opted to defer the application to seek clarification on materials and to clarify a number of clarify if a number of structural buttresses would be removed. The applicant has submitted amended plans and has provided clarification. In terms of the materials, they have been confirmed as follows. With regard to the rear extension and alterations, the existing render would be retained and recoated with painted sand cement render. The front stair tower and extension to be built with reclaimed stone where feasible and new stonework to match existing windows and stone surrounds to be retained, but new glazing and metal subframes, and new natural slate roof coverings. And with regard to the entrance foyer, clay tile hanging to the walls, natural slate to the pitch roofs with single ply membrane to the flat link, aluminium framed curtain walling and windows. You will have noticed on the agenda report that condition 2 requires samples of external materials to be provided prior to development and to be agreed with officers. With regard to the buttresses, it's been confirmed that no structural buttresses would be removed as part of the proposal, and it should be noted that there was never any intention to remove these. I'll now take you through the proposal in detail. So on this slide, we see the location of the church, which is adjacent to the corner of South Street and Victoria Road. Just to the southwest of the site is the Bush Hotel car park, and then further down Victoria Road is the main central car park. And Sainsbury's is here, which is shown better on the aerial photograph there. So I provided some site photographs. So photograph A is taken from South Street looking towards the front of the church. B is taken from the Bush car park looking at the rear element of the church, which is proposed to be partly demolished. And C is taken from Victoria Road looking up towards the spire of the church. Photograph D is taken closer to the proposed area for the new entrance foyer and cafe, taken from South Street. Photograph E shows the sort of front elevation of the side adjacent to Victoria Road, and photograph F is taken from the rear, kind of from the Bush car park looking towards the rear halls. Here we see the proposed block plan where we see the proposed entrance foyer and cafe here, and the area where the existing halls would be partly demolished is here. And here we see the revised parking layout. I've shown in quite some detail the existing and proposed elevations to give you sort of a clearer view of what is proposed. So here we see the front or northeastern elevation with the existing on the left and proposed on the right. On this slide, we see the existing rear or southwestern elevation and the proposed, so again, existing on the left and proposed on the right. This is the northwestern side elevation, which shows where in the proposed, you can see where the proposed entrance foyer and cafe would be located. And then this is the elevation from Victoria Road, so the southeastern side elevation, which shows where the existing halls would be partially demolished. Here we see the proposed floor plan. Part of the proposal would see the insertion of a mezzanine floor, and I've indicated in a dashed line here where that would be located. So here we see where the new entrance foyer and cafe would be sited, and then again the rear halls would be partially demolished there. I've also provided some visuals of the proposal, kind of the key elements of the proposal. So here we see where the new foyer and cafe would be, and this visual here and here show the location of the proposed partial demolition of the rear halls. So this slide contains what officers consider to be the main considerations in relation to the proposal. Impact on conservation area and listed building. I would reiterate here that the church has ecclesiastical exemption, and therefore the listed building authority for this building is the relevant synod and not Waverley Borough Council. However, the council is the planning authority and has therefore assessed the application on the basis of the use and external appearance. The Council's Historic Building Officer and Landscape and Tree Officer have been consulted on the application. Officers consider that the proposed design would improve the setting of the church, in particular views along Victoria Road. However, the proposed design does not make a strong statement. This, together with the loss of the mimosa tree to the north of the church, are considered to lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset. The National Planning Policy Framework requires that where a proposal would lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, that this should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including securing its optimal viable use. Officers consider that the public benefits of the proposal, by reason of the additional and improved space and facilities for the church and its users, would outweigh this harm. With regard to the impact on visual amenity, the materials, as set out earlier, are considered to be acceptable, and given the importance of the building and its location, it is recommended that a condition be attached requiring the submission of material samples. The proposed alterations adjacent to Victoria Road would reduce the scale and bulk of the building, which is considered to improve the appearance of the church. With regard to highways and parking, the proposal would improve the existing parking arrangements. The County Highway Authority has been consulted and have raised no concerns, subject to a number of conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. We have two public speakers on this item. The first one is Mr. Robert Blower, who's an objector. Please, Mr. Blower, as you well know.
Sorry. My name is Robert Blower. I'm a chartered architect and I've lived and worked in Farnham for 46 years. In March next year, Farnham celebrates the 50th anniversary of its conservation area, established by the 1967 Civic Amenities Act. From its inception, the Act had support from all parties in Parliament and imposed new duties on local authorities to uphold the principles to protect buildings and areas of architectural character, including the preservation of trees and open spaces, with the aim of improving the appearance of historic towns. Farnham's appraisal of its conservation area was adopted by Waverley Borough Council as a supplementary planning document in February 2005, reinforcing the protection of trees, open spaces and buildings. In this respect, the current proposals fail for the following reasons. Thomas Wannacott's fine church and spire is centrally positioned on a confined site, so its side and front facades can be appreciated. The proposed extensions will obscure these, including the whole length of the large hall and the church's buttresses, paired lancets with their bathstone dressings and bargate stone walling, and the rear apse lancet windows. Wannacott's design places the entrance on the main axis of the church, but the entrance as proposed is through a cafe, which gives the impression of a shop front rather than the main entrance to a place of worship. The loss of a delightful open space with its lovely large mimosa tree in a town with few trees and its precious open spaces. The treatment of the schoolroom, large hall, with its conversion to a kitchen and toilet block is quite appalling and a loss of a much-used and popular public facility. Poor design and commercial character, not reflecting the civic role of the church, is one of several criticisms made by Historic England's Inspector of Buildings, including a failure to acknowledge Farnham's conservation area and the harm caused by the proposals to its listed buildings. Waverley's Planning Officer's report confirms there is harm and that the proposals are not entirely in accordance with the development plan. Planning permission is required. The NPPF policies apply, which require a convincing justification for any harmful impacts to designated heritage assets. Any harm has to be avoided. As no justification is provided by the application, an alternative approach has been circulated to members, which retains and upgrades the existing two-storey 1929 extension and avoids any harm whilst providing all the required amenities. There is no demolition, no increase in footprint, no loss of open space, and no tree felling, ensuring less disturbance, less waste, less dust, fewer carbon emissions, reduction in climate change, and at a substantial cost saving. What is not to like in this approach? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have another public speaker. Mr Evans, Mr Gareth Evans, who's a support. Sorry, I got the name wrong. Nick, I believe. Nick?
Yes, Nick Saville.
Oh, yes, sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Good evening, members. Good evening, councillors. My name is Nick Saville. I'm the project manager for the Pilgrim Project at the Spire Church. The plans before you are the culmination of a long process of consultation, collaboration and iteration, taking on feedback from many parties, including your own planning and conservation officers, this planning committee, and even, believe it or not, comments from the Farnham Society. It presents a significant improvement to the building. The 130 members of our church love our building and they love Farnham. They're not shy of telling us if they don't agree with something. Any scheme which would harm either the building or the town would soon be rejected. But they love this new proposal. The proposal addresses a number of issues. The building is in a major need of renovation, and we cannot afford to maintain it in its current state. It shows poor use of space, outdated facilities, and no access for the disabled and infirm to much of the building. As a community hub, it is used by over 30 groups, as well as many, many vulnerable and lonely people. But it is bursting at the seams, and with few other affordable community spaces in the town centre, that capacity is sorely needed. The existing halls in Victoria Road are described by your Historic Buildings Officer as rather ponderous. They present an unfinished and forbidding appearance, and he says they do not sit comfortably with the apse of the church. That's the existing halls. Our plans transform them into one which he says is considered to be well designed and improves the appearance of the southern elevation of the building. To the north, our new foyer and cafe uses appropriate materials and roofline to create a bright and modern entranceway and cafe which is subservient to the existing buildings and about which the planning officer states, whilst modern in appearance, is considered to be a sympathetic design in keeping with the existing building. Take a look at the plans yourself. This is no carbuncle. This is attractive and well-designed architecture. It sits quietly with the existing building and will fit in very nicely with the town centre conservation area. We are, of course, sad that this results in the loss of the mimosa tree. It is, however, only 20 years old, much younger than the conservation area. It has grown too large for the location already. However, planting in front of the building will help to offset that. Our proposals have received significant support from across the community of Farnham. This is reflected by the 38 letters of support received to the planning application, not just from members of our church, but from many people in the wider community. And it's reflected in the fact that we are almost halfway towards the funding target for this project. There has, in fact, been very little opposition to the scheme, except from the Farnham Society Planning Committee. Of 14 letters of objection, all but 2 are either from the committee or the members of the committee, including, of course, and Mr. Blower just quoted from it, letters addressed to third parties regarding previous iterations of this scheme. The rumour that people in Farnham are growing tired of the council dragging its heels over this planning application. Today, we call on you to show your impartiality to the lobbying of the Farnham Society. We ask you to see this as attractive and good design. We ask you to show the council's support for grassroots initiative, which delivers significant public benefit for the people of Farnham. And we ask you to back your planning officer's recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Okay. Councillors? Oh, Nick, could you just turn the lights off? Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Councillor? Councillor Murray's and then Councillor Edmonds.
I appreciate the efforts that have been made to improve the materials, though I think aluminium surrounds for the windows would not be appropriate. But I do, design is subjective. We're looking at two issues here. One is the community and one is the historic architecture and the conservation area. And the two we should be able to marry. My feeling is that I would be very sad to see the second story on the southeast side brought down. I went into the church just on Friday, and I cannot understand why you can't retain that story inside, refurbish it, and actually, if you wanted more space, you could push up into a third story. But however, when you take away that story, with the current design that they're serving up now, you're going to lose approximately 39 square meters of space. So I don't really understand what's going on there, because you could actually put a lift underneath on that side, which would enable people to get up to that second story, refurbish that area, and we wouldn't lose what I think lends the church a symmetry. I think it looks very nice with that. I love the mullioned windows and the ones that are reflected above that. And you've got so much space up there, which is simply not being used properly. The other thing that I recognise is that the chancel, which is being blocked at the moment, the light, that's going to be taken away and then reblocked again. The front of the church, where most people enter a church, because that's how a church is in many ways being designed, because you come through the front and you're taken up and look upwards, heavenwards. That's why churches are like that, to take you from the material world to the spiritual world. And having to go round a side entrance to what I think is an extremely ugly glass sort of 1980s style side entrance, to come through a cafe does not lend itself to what this church was designed for. And I'm trying to see how we can marry the two things, where we improve the space for the people who need to use it, but also retain the beauty of the architecture. I mean, it's nearly, in 10 years' time, whatever, the extension will be nearly 100 years old. The loss of the tree in the secluded garden area, I think that's a great shame. And the idea of the front door just being glazed over, that doesn't really do it, I think, in terms of what this church is, how this church is meant to be perceived. The mezzanine level, where you're thinking of putting that up, if it's got to be more than 8 feet high, the lowest level can be 8 feet, I believe. I think that will cut across the beautiful round window and obstruct that. So from my point of view, I think the two things can be made to work. I don't think being told you're dragging your feet, it's not that you're dragging your feet, you're trying to find a way through that would be best for everything. And from my point of view, I think it's something worth keeping, and I think it's worth redressing in terms of loss of space, doing it the way that it's being done. I don't think that when you come into the North Hall, you want to look up and see kitchen, lavatories and cafe. Thanks.
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on what I consider irrationality, which is probably more legal bent than planning bent. Farnham's air quality management area was set up in 2005 as required by the 1995 Environmental Act. Nanoparticles are a pollutant for which there is no recognised safe level, and they are now a significant health concern, especially in Farnham. The Air Quality Standards Regulation 2010 demands that the Secretary of State must ensure that level of particulate matter does not exceed the limit values. The Secretary of State must ensure that levels are maintained below the limit values and must endeavour to maintain the best ambient air quality with sustainable development. We also have the Waverley Air Quality Action Plan 2008 the Surrey Transport Plan and Congestion Strategy 2014, the Surrey Transport Air Quality Strategy 2016, the Department for Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs Local Air Quality Management Policy Guidance, PG 16, April 2016. The Court of Appeal, Administrative Court, Planning Court, Mr. Justice Dove, in 2017 said, the Secretary of State acknowledges in these proceedings that the effects of a development on air quality in the local area are capable of being a decisive factor in the determination of an application for planning permission, no matter whether the decision maker is the Secretary of State or the local planning authority. The County Council, as Highways Authority for the county roadwork, has a statutory duty to work to bring forward proposals for air quality management areas to improve air quality. I was somewhat surprised that the Surrey Highways Authority has got no comment. However, I cannot understand how this development can take place without frustrating the particulate level that we have to maintain within the air quality management area.
I believe these are covered in the conditions. Yes,
Conditions 4 and 5.
Any comment, Mr. Borough?
Just to say, Chairman, that that air quality conditions, to the extent that they affect this development, are covered by conditions 4 and 5 on page 54.
Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see there's lots of fors and against on this one, so it makes it difficult. I've got a lot of sympathy for the church's proposal and the reasons that they put forward for it. And I can see some attractions for the redesign of that southern elevation. But against that, you know, I'm not all that concerned about what's there at the moment on that. But I'm also very cognizant of the criticisms that have come up, in particular for the loss of that, the main entrance, which I think is quite significant. And, you know, the alternative of entering via a cafe, which doesn't seem to be quite right to me. But, and also, of course, I've seen the alternatives that have been put around by other architects and local people, which seem to have a number of positives as well. So out of all this, more than anything, I think from the town's point of view, I'm very concerned about the sort of conflict between the church's proposal and some of the community proposals, which are well founded. And if there was any way in which we could, you know, go around the buoy once more, I would prefer to see that, maybe with some sort of design review panel involved to, you know, to sit down with both sides and see something which more people would feel comfortable with. So that's my position here. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Apart from the Farnham Society, I haven't heard a single person criticise this design or this application in any way. And I do talk to a lot of people, as those of you who know me well will know. I think looking at that picture is interesting. That's the one that's up there. I think the existing flatters the building to a great extent. That building, rather ponderous is a polite way of putting it. When you come round from the Bush car park, round into Victoria Road, you are not looking at a thing of beauty. Nor is this right in the middle of a load of beautiful buildings in the conservation area. It's very close to the Sainsbury's car park. We've got modern office buildings. Well, not modern, but in fact, that's one of the reasons that they're standing there empty. Slightly dated office blocks. We are not talking here about a beautiful area. I have been horrified at the number of emails that have been flying about this. The arrogance of certain members of this committee who think that they have the right to tell this church what to do. I don't go to this church. I don't know what the church wants any more than anybody else sitting on this committee, unless they go to the church. I'm looking at this as a planning application. Whether or not the benefits of what is proposed outweigh the harm. This has been changed, and I think it has been improved, although quite frankly, I would have supported the previous application. There is nothing wrong with what they are trying to achieve on this site. The use of the materials is definitely improved. One mimosa tree, yes, any tree lost is sad, but putting other trees in at the front of the church or anywhere else is going to help to soften whatever we don't like about the built form. But I'm just amazed. I even heard in the streets yesterday members of this committee discussing this. I don't understand how the Farnham Society, whom I admire greatly, can have put so much weight against this application. It's not a bad application at all. It is trying to do something on this site, which is not a site of beauty. For goodness sake, look at the site we're looking at. Yes, we want to keep the beautiful parts of the building as they stand, and I think we are going to do that. And what we are going to gain as a town is a space that is going to be used, is going to be fit for purpose. Anyone who's been in that gloomy hall, it's not fit for purpose. It's not even very pleasant, to be honest, at the moment. I'm sorry, church. But it's, it is not a thing of beauty. I find this so frustrating that just because the Farnham Society Planning Committee doesn't like it, we seem to have to turn it down or get somebody's wife or husband to put in something else. For goodness sake, be professional as a planning committee. Look at this as a building. Look at what they're trying to achieve. Weigh up the harms and the benefits and come to a conclusion, but only, please, on planning grounds.
Very much. Councillor Rubini.
Thanks, Chairman. I don't live in Farnham. I've never lived in Farnham. However, I have worked there, and I work just around the corner. And the one thing that's always struck me about this church is that horrible, great big white wall overlooking the Bush car park. It doesn't look a thing of beauty to me. And I must admit, on the plans you've got here, where they intend to lower it and show from that area more of the church, then as far as I'm concerned, that's got to be a very good positive. So, although I don't live in Farnham, I would accept that this has got to be something that should be approved. Thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Chairman. I was very concerned when I heard about this, that there was mention of the tree being taken down. So I went to go and have a look on the weekend. And I have actually sent Philippa some photographs, which I thought might be useful to show to the committee. The mimosa is, as I say, 20 years old, and it is quite a small square. I mean, we've got to remember that this is opposite Victoria Gardens, which we know won the Britain in Bloom, one of the Britain in Bloom Awards. So this square really doesn't compare to some of the more beautiful squares that exist in Farnham. When you look at this tree, it's already out of proportion in the plot it sits. It's actually quite twisted, and the branches are knocking hard against buildings on both sides. It's bending over, and it's therefore quite restricted. There isn't a bench underneath it to sit it, and in fact, the tree does actually make the corner quite dark. Now, I normally love trees, as you all know. So the thing to bear in mind is, if I've given some other photographs, is there is actually a lot of planting. Many of the planning developments we see here have lots and lots of trees on them to disguise what are normally quite ugly houses. But in this case, the diagrams you've seen don't show any trees, except there are some in some of the planning. But there are actually some very big beds all the way around the church. And there are actually quite a lot of gardeners in this church. I've been there past a number of times where they're selling plants for charity. And if you have fast-growing shrubs, which are coppiced, or fast-growing shrubs with the kind of berries that encourage our local birds, this could be a real asset and actually remove more carbon from the air than, say, this one old and fairly stunted tree. So I felt that because there's such an opportunity there's such a lot of planting around this site, that maybe, and I felt also, I quite like the cafe. I do go to church every week, not this one, I go to a Catholic church up the road. And when I go in there, I'm always sort of like, oh, the cafe has been put on the front, and it's sort of a very generous act where they sell like soup and bread, and it's the cheapest soup and bread in Farnham, and there's a lot of old people who use it. So it has a very Christian ethos to it, but it does sometimes feel a bit awkward stumbling through the cafe into church. So I actually really like the idea of putting the cafe on the side and making it much larger and making their generosity extend a bit further. And I do think it looks rather nice. So yes, I really, I don't think we can hold one tree against it. I think we should let them go ahead. I think the message we're sending to the 30 or so groups who use this group is really bad. I mean, I'm struggling to find reasons. We have to be really clear. If we're going to turn this down, can we be really clear that we're not criticising all the charitable activity that goes on, all the good that this church gives to our community, and all of the amazing volunteers who give up hours and hours of their lives to help other people? Because I'm worried that by refusing this planning application, we are being very negative towards those people. Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Is it to add, councillor?
Just to say that because you're making a decision from your own point of view about something that you think design-wise is better, that does not negate how you feel about the community. I really object to some of the things that have been said tonight, because I think I stuck to the proposed design and what I felt was appropriate. And I'm also very aware what it does for the community, though I'm aware that these two churches, the Methodist Church and this one, is amalgamated. So there is, I presume there's room for those communities to carry on being helped whilst the work is taking place. But I really do object to people making out that one is not doing one's job properly here. And I think that I have done. And I'm entitled to express my opinion about how I feel the design should be. And it's got nothing to do with how I think about the community. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Murray. Any other councillor wish to speak, or shall we move to the recommendation? Okay. Difficult. We'll move. The recommendation is that, subject to condition 1 and informative 1 and additional condition 2 in the update, permission be granted. Those in favour vote plus green, those against red, and abstain blue. You know what I mean? Has everybody voted on that?
Yep, so we have 6 in favour for the recommendation, 5 against and 2 abstentions.
Then the application is granted. Thank you very much. By one vote.
Something they're going to have to do in chairman's again. I told them to do the officer's recommendation this time, not bugger about.
Right, move on.
Outrageously didn't exist.
Okay, we now come on to 2 items which are not public speaking items, and the first one is it's B1, WA 2019-1490, the communal room, Chancery's Court at the Chancery's, Farnham. Basically an application under Regulation 3, the change of use from a community space, D1, to office/welfare area for car park staff, B1A, together with the replacement of windows and doors as amended by plans received 24th October 2019 and as amplified by information received on the 6th of November 2019. The officer report, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the current planning application before you is the Council's own application for the change of use of community space in Class D1 to an office and welfare facility for Farnham's car park enforcement officers, together with some physical works which include the replacement of windows and doors. The building in question is located within a residential area of Farnham within the developed area. The red line goes... Oh, sorry, I don't have a mouse? Is there a mouse? Okay, sorry. So the red line goes around the whole building, but actually because of the slope of the site, the basement, which is the subject of the application, only occupies half the footprint of the building. And the area in question has recently been in use by community groups on an ad hoc basis. You'll also see that there are some car parking spaces outlined in red, and they form part of the planning application proposal, and they would be allocated for the B1 office use. So these are the existing and proposed plans. Effectively, there's little difference between the two. You can see that, There we go. So you can see that this is the area here. It's 46 square metres that we're talking about. And as already said, it's been used by community groups on an ad hoc basis in recent years. So the hours of operation for the office use would be 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday to Saturday. For most of the time, there'd be no more than 2 people actually in the office. So that would be the car park enforcement manager and his sort of senior assistant. But at various points through the day, those car park enforcement officers who work on shifts will return back to the unit for breaks. So this is photographs of the site. So photograph A shows the front elevation of the unit, which is effectively the white area at the bottom of the building. And you can see there's a car parking area in front of it. Photo B effectively shows the car parking spaces to the rear of the site that would be allocated towards the office use. So those are these car parking spaces here, which are these car parking spaces on the aerial. I should also point out that there is a community centre located in proximity to the site just here. And that's relevant in terms of considering the principle of the change of use. So officers of the view that the principle of the change of use is acceptable. The policy relating to community service uses is clear that the council would resist the loss of a key community facility. So the assessment is whether this is a key community facility. Officers of the view that given the small nature of the unit, its ad hoc use over the years, its proximity to a purpose-built community centre, and that it has had previous permissions for office use, that it isn't considered to be a key community facility, and therefore the principle of its loss is acceptable. Officers are also of the view that an office use in this location is appropriate. In terms of residential amenity, there are flats immediately above the office. However, by definition, an office use should be appropriate for a residential area, given the small size of the office use, the number of people that would be in the office at any one time, and the hours of operation during the day. Officers consider there would be no harmful impact on neighbouring residential amenity. And finally, one of the key considerations is that of car parking. So as discussed already, the proposal includes the use of 3 car parking spaces here for the council's car parking enforcement officers. Surrey County Highway Authority have not objected to the proposal on the basis that the level of car parking arising from the office use would be commensurate to that of community service use. And in addition to that, the applicants did submit a car parking survey which indicated that there was sufficient capacity in the surrounding car parks and streets where there is unrestricted car parking to ensure that no harm would arise in terms of car parking impact. So effectively, officers are recommending approval subject to conditions set out on the agenda, and also an additional condition that was set out on the written update sheet relating to the allocation of those 3 car parking spaces. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any councillors? Yes, Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, good evening. I do actually know this estate quite well because one of the friends of my children lives up there, and I take her home. So after dance class on Wednesdays. So every Wednesday night I drive up this street And actually, the parking is bedlam. I have difficulty getting to the top of the hill in my small car. So I think it's to say that I can. So I'm just trying to I think to say that it wouldn't impact the parking is already very, very, very tight. So can we go over that again, please?
Yes, certainly. So I suppose there are a number of considerations. So firstly, we have to consider the fact that if we're considering the existing unit with the existing community service use, that would generate a level of car parking which we consider would be commensurate to the car parking, the level of car parking that would be generated by an office use. So that would be the first consideration. And secondly,
so it's daytime only, is it, that these parking spaces get? Yeah.
No, sorry, if I can just clarify. So the car parking enforcement vehicles would be parked overnight. So if I can just sort of take you through the steps of the considerations on the highways matters. So firstly, we have the fact that we consider that the sort of two uses are commensurate in terms of the car parking impact, and the fact that the car parking is unrestricted at the moment. So effectively, if you had community service users going to and from the site, they could park anywhere. And then, as an additional consideration on that, the applicants have submitted a car parking survey, and that survey was undertaken over the course of 3 days. So it was a Saturday and a Monday and a Tuesday to try and capture the best information they could. And the survey ran from 7:30 in the morning till 7 o'clock in the evening. And so we feel that although that survey doesn't cover the night time, it should cover the period of time when workers have come back from their work and effectively parked their cars up. So on that basis, we feel that there's sufficient capacity.
Martin, and then Councillor Cook.
Excuse me, who's using these car parking spaces at the moment? Because they're by the community centre, aren't they used by the community centre?
So effectively, all the car parking spaces in the estate are unallocated, so anybody could use those car parking spaces. So they're not designated for the community centre use. They can be used by anybody.
Yeah, I think this is the problem. I think if we... Yeah.
Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, the more questions we ask and the more answers we get, the more confused I am. I assumed that these spaces would be freed up. How are the people coming to work if they're not coming in the vans that they're going to use and go home in them? I don't understand why we're going to have overnight parking for an office use. That's the bit I don't really understand. Most people come to work in their van and go home in their van.
Ruth.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion. So effectively, the workers turn up by their own mode of transport, be that on foot or in their own car, and then they pick up the car enforcement vehicles and take those out. And then at the end of their shift, they return the car enforcement vehicles back. So they don't have allocated their own car enforcement vehicles that they take home.
Dixon.
Yeah, so, I mean, so effectively we're taking 3 spaces away from a very crowded estate. And when I go up there in the evenings, you know, people parked all over the place. And you might end up with these cars being blocked in first thing in the morning. But the other thing I'm going to ask is why did we decide to put them there? We've got a huge car park behind Waitrose. Could the vehicles not be stored there?
So my understanding on the location is the proximity of, well, so first of all, there is a car parking area immediately. So there's a car parking area here immediately adjacent to the block of flats, and that's unrestricted car parking. So any users of the unit could currently park there, but after consultation by the council with residents, it was concluded that that wouldn't be appropriate because the residents of this block would want to use these car parking spaces. And therefore, the next closest option was these car parking spaces here, and I presume that they have been chosen because of their proximity to the B1 office use, and that Waitrose car park would be considered to be too far away.
Am I correct in assuming then that we're commandeering these parking spaces to give free parking? In other words, I assume there's no charge in this area.
There is no charge in this. Oh, sorry.
I just think it's worth saying, Chairman, that this is for the council's own parking service. These are people who are, of course, looking after our parking interests, and they are specifically enforcing the regulations that we put in place. So there isn't a case of it's not a free-for-all. They are actually people who work with us and for us for the benefit of the community on parking control.
Sure, but they're parking their own vehicles. Am I not correct?
We ain't carry it. Councillor Hunt first. Well, I'll come back to Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, who owns the cars that are going to be parked there? There is a point. Who owns the cars that are going to be parked there that you're wishing to park there? The council? Well, why can't you just give them passes to park in any of the car parks in the town?
I'll come back to that one.
Why do you need to take those spaces when you just give them a pass like we have passes and just let them park in any of the car parks in the town centre?
Effectively, my understanding is that they need a designated welfare facility. So they go out and do their car parking duties, and then they need somewhere to come back to have their lunch, have a comfort break, etc. And so they need the car parking spaces to be close to that facility.
Okay, but wouldn't...
Councillor Coburn.
Right, okay,
Councillor Coburn, before I make a point.
I think I'm going to look as confused as Councillor Hunt. I assumed that these spaces would be free at night. I assumed, as I said before, that people would come, park, go do their business, go home. We are looking here at an estate which was built at a time when we really didn't know any better. And we made very little provision for the car. And as Councillor Dixon said, I mean, it's just a nightmare at times. And it just seems to me irresponsible to take away for 24 hours 3 car parking spaces, and probably more because, as Councillor Hunt said, they're going to come in their own car. So they're going to leave those somewhere, presumably, while they get into the cars that are blocking up that space for 24 hours a day. I don't fully understand how we've ended up with this. I thought it was very simple, because had it just been arriving to go to work and going home in your van, I had no problem with that, because that freed up the space when it wasn't being used for residents on the estate. I'm uneasy about this. I think there's, for all sorts of reasons, I don't think it's the best use of vehicles, man's time, or this estate.
Councillor Ward.
Can I join the great confused for a minute? As I understand it, overnight, the parking enforcement vehicles owned by whoever happens to employ the parking enforcement officers will be parked there. So are they going to be empty all day, or what's going to happen to them in the daytime? Because I assume these people are going to be driving around in their little parking enforcement officers' cars enforcing parking. So I'm even more confused than Councillor Coburn, if that's possible.
Ruth.
Right, I'm really sorry. I will try and sort out everyone's confusion. So effectively, the car parking enforcement officers work on shifts. So there are 3 car parking enforcement vehicles, which I presume are owned by the contractors who do the car parking enforcement. So the enforcement officers work on shifts. So it may be the case that at some point during the day, all the cars are out, or it may be the case that during the day, one of the cars are out or 2 of the cars are out. What happens is, because they turn up through their own mode of transport, they turn up to the site and they take the vehicles out from those car parking spaces, and at the end of their shift, they return those vehicles to those car parking spaces. And then, because they finish at 6:30, from 6:30 until the following day at 8 a.m, those cars are kept in those 3 car parking spaces. And I hope that makes everything clear.
Just a point of clarification, Ruth. Isn't it true that this is already happens and what we're trying to do is regularise what already happens?
Well, there is some question mark over the lawful use of the site. So there is some history of this unit having been given B1 permissions. It's not entirely clear whether the later B1 permission was implemented, but community uses have been using it on an ad hoc basis within the last 10 years. But whether that lawfully makes it a community service use it's not entirely clear, effectively.
I was meaning to comment, aren't these vehicles already parking on the estate overnight?
Yes.
No, so I know... Sorry. Yes, I know within a letter of objection, somebody did raise the issue of whether the use had already begun. I did speak to the applicant on that, and what they have said is that the sort of effectively the office furniture is in there, and the manager goes to site in the mornings to look at various things on the computer. But at the moment, that is the maximum that is going on site, I have been advised.
Right.
I'm also a bit confused. We've had a bit of common sense to it. Assuming that the car parking gentleman can't drive 2 vehicles at once, when he removes the van from the space, why can't he put his car in there?
Councillor Martin, then you can come. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, yeah, he could put it in there.
I'm just going to ask a question. Is this the enforcement officers just for the Farnham area, or is it for the whole of Waverley? These 3 cars?
Ruth?
I'm not sure. I presumed Farnham, but I haven't specifically asked that question.
Because if it's not just Farnham, we could put them somewhere else. If it's for the whole of Waverley, we could put them somewhere else.
I mean, essentially, we've considered the application that is before us, and for the reasons set out in the report, we think it's an acceptable location.
Or they just I would like to know if they're for Farnham or they have for the whole borough.
I think, Councillor Martin, you've got to remember you're sitting here as a Waverley Borough councillor. Yeah, but I mean...
Sorry.
We sat here as borough councillors, not Farnham councillors. Ruth, do you want to say anything? No?
Yeah, sorry, I think really just to reiterate the fact that we have, we've looked at the planning merits of the scheme, and irrespective of whether the enforcement officers are borough-wide or just Farnham-based, we're of the view that this proposal is acceptable.
Perhaps, as so many people are confused, we could, in the interest of fairness, employ a third-party car parking enforcement agency to make sure that this whole thing runs smoothly.
Councillor Disney, is it short or not?
Yes, it is. I mean, this estate is one of possibly the most run-down estates in Farnham. And it's not the big houses that we've been talking about all evening. For us, it just feels unjust for us to put 3 council cars in there and to block off parking that's probably being used by the community at the moment. And the parking is very, very bad in the evening. It's all over the place. It really is. I don't think the survey must reflect what I see every Wednesday.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Or is it quick, Roger?
Is there any CCTV on the site? Because the vehicles will be unattended overnight, and I wouldn't like to leave a car there overnight, personally.
I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
Okay. Right. I like Councillor Corbyn. I thought this was going to be straightforward, but there you go. It's obviously not. I would like to remind all members of the committee that this particular item has only come before the committee because it is a Borough Council application. Normally, I think we wouldn't have even seen this if it had been, is that right? True to say? Is that true to say? Yeah. And in fact, before we vote, I think I must point out to members that if this went to an appeal situation, I'm sure we would lose, but that's only my view. The odds would be that we'd probably lose. The point is it's only come to this committee because it's a Borough Council application. That's all I'm trying to say.
I remain confused, and I'm looking around at the bright, shining faces around me. I think I'm in the majority. I might suggest that we actually defer this until we actually get a more concrete idea of what's happening, because I'm going to find it very difficult to support something I don't understand.
Excuse me, Chairman, if I may just make a final remark. You're losing car parking spaces, that's the issue, on an estate. However, it's a council contractor, and it's all about enforcement of our parking, and it's a use that has actually been an office use and a community-style use for years and years and years. The impact, in our view, is actually very small. And that's really the only reason that it's been brought. I don't really see the reason for the confusion. You are actually losing parking spaces. That's the judgment that you're making. And let's not beat about the bush.
The recommendation is that subject to condition 1, informative 1, and additional condition 2, which in the update permission be granted. Could you please vote on that one, please? Green for yes, red for no, and blue for abstentions.
Okay, so we put on presentation. So we have 5 for, 4 abstentions, and 4 against. So it's carried.
Right, okay, can we move on, please? The last item. Well done. Well done, that was good. That was good. Okay, the last item tonight is another non-speaking item. WA 2019-1587, Meadowview, 2 Ridgeway Cottages, Runwick Lane, Runwick.
It works, but it's just...
Erection, extension and alterations following demolition of part of the existing dwelling. Mr. Houston, back again. Present the case.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a part single and part 2-storey rear extension following the demolition of the existing single-storey extension. Since writing the report, there is one update on the update sheet for an obscure glazing condition on the proposed first floor window to prevent views into the property old tiles. The application site is in red. 2 Meadowview is located in the middle of a small terrace within the countryside beyond the Greenbelt and within the AGLV. So here is the proposed extension. The single-storey element is the same length as the existing. Within the amenity area of 1 Ridgeway Cottages to the south, there is a large outbuilding on the boundary and a single-storey rear extension. These will be seen in the photographs, however, not shown on the block plan. So there was a previously refused scheme for WA 2018-0992. Here are the refused rear and side elevations. It was previously refused due to the size and sighting that would result in unacceptable loss of light, outlook and overbearing to 1 Runwick Lane and light and outlook to 3 Runwick Lane. So these are now the existing and proposed rear elevations, with the existing on the left and proposed on the right. got the side view of the proposed and existing, the existing on the left, proposed on the right. The height of the proposed single-storey element is 20 centimetres taller than the existing. Got the ground floor plans here, with the existing again on the left, proposed on the right. Got the photos of the site. So the photo on the left is the view of the existing flat roof rear extension. I would point out the pitched roof extension here is part of number 3 Runwick Lane and not the application property. The second photo shows the gap where the single-storey extension will sort of infill almost up to the boundary with 1 Runwick Lane. The photo on the left shows the existing outbuilding within number 1's garden. That is not on the location or block plan, but it does exist. And number 4 shows the view from the top of the outbuilding here with the kitchen window of the neighbour number 1 shown down there. So the matter for consideration is the impact on the countryside beyond the greenbelt, the impact on the AGLV, the design and impact on visual amenity, and the impact on residential amenity of neighbours. For the reasons set out in the officer report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Carl. Right. Councillors, anyone wish to speak on this item? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Carol, could we go back to the photograph that showed the kitchen window of number 1? Yeah. And can you just confirm the height of the new extension that will be in front of that kitchen window? Or next to the side of the kitchen window?
The height will be, I've measured it, 3.05 metres, which is 20 centimetres taller than the existing.
So how does that on the wall? Can we show that on the wall? Can you give an indication of the wall? There we go. About from there across. Yeah, yeah.
And when you say so many centimetres higher than the existing, can you show the existing? Right, but that's not part of their property. That's number 3.
That bit is, this pitched bit isn't.
Yeah.
The pitched bit here is part of number 3, but this single-storey flat roof is part of the application site.
Right. But effectively it's moving towards the boundary wall.
Yes.
Right. So finally, what I'd like to say, having been to the site, what you don't see from the kitchen window of number 1 is that their garden at the moment is totally enclosed, and there is no light that comes through to the kitchen window except over the boundary wall, which will then have the extension next to it. So I think there's going to be a serious loss of light to number 1. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Okay. We move to the recommendation that subject to conditions 1 to 3 and comments 1 permission is granted. Those in favour press green, those against press red, and if you have a shall say blue.
Apologies, Chairman. The computer has frozen, so can we do show his hands? Sorry about that. I can't change it, so if we can do in favour, against and abstentions through show of hands. I'm really sorry.
Are members happy with that situation? Mr Ward, can I ask you? Why not?
We have to proceed, so let's get on with it.
So, those in favour of the recommendation, please raise their hand. Can you count all that?
That is none.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 against.
Okay, and those who wish to abstain?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, yeah, alternative motion, Chairman.
An alternative motion is the application be refused, presumably on the effect of the neighbours meeting of number. The those in
The proposal, by reason of its size and siting, would result in an unacceptable loss of light, outlook and overbearing impact to the adjoining property at number 1. The proposal would therefore conflict with policy TD1 of the Local Plan 2018 and policies D1 and D4 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002 and the MPPF 2019.
could you raise your hands, please?
Okay.
Against?
Oh, no, can you do it again?
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, dear, dear. Sorry.
Those in agreement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favour of refusal.
This is the amendment recommendation again. Yeah. Okay.
The amendment.
Yes,
yeah.
and again.
Against.
Against? Anyone raise hands?
None.
None.
None. Abstentions.
Oh.
4
Abstentions.
should be.
In other words, we refuse the application by 9 votes to 0, 1 abstention. Yes.
No, we
There
haven't
should be
taken the
another-
abstentions yet. We haven't
Oh,
taken
sorry,
the
sorry,
abstentions.
sorry. I do apologise.
No, this is voting on the motion for refusal.
The motion for refusal is that it's the... Please, officers, can you repeat it, please?
The motion is to refuse the application for the following reasons, which Carl will now read to you.
The proposal, by reason of its size and siting, would result in an unacceptable loss of light, outlook and overbearing impact to the adjoining property at number 1. The proposal would therefore conflict with policy TD1 of the Local Plan 2018 and policies D1 and D4 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002 and the MPPF 2019.
So those in favour of the refusal.
Those in favour of the refusal?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Against? Right. Well, thank you very much, councillors. I think there's nothing for exempt items. I think that concludes the business tonight.
Oh, that
wasn't it.
Yeah.
Okay. May I wish you all a happy Christmas? And I look forward, believe it or not, I actually look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Thank you.
Well done, mate.
It was always going to be one of those meetings.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.